Hello, friends. Welcome to TICE. Today we have with us Mr. Daya Prakash, an esteemed professional in the realm of human resources and talent acquisition. With a distinguished career marked by profound expertise, Mr. Prakash, the founder of Talentonlease, brings a wealth of experience to our discussion on the pivotal role of human resources in the recruitment and growth of startups. Mr. Daya Prakash stands out as a strategic talent acquisition expert with a remarkable career trajectory that includes serving as the Chief Information Officer at LG. Mr. Prakash possesses a unique perspective that integrates both technological and strategic acumen into the world of HR. Join us as we delve into Mr. Daya Prakash's insights on shaping careers, his experiences as a seasoned professional, and the contributions he has made to startup growth through his visionary approach to talent acquisition. Mr. Daya, welcome to the show. Mr. Daya, can you please share your insights on the crucial intersection between organizational culture and strategic imperatives, particularly in the context of human resource management in the startups?
Sure. Um, in, we are all aware, as they say in the startup world, that it is all about, idea is worth 1%, everything else is execution, right? And if I
Yes.
look at that, in the startup world, typically, strategic imperatives are, there just to make sure that there is guidance and the direction to the organization in which they would like to grow. Uh, but in order to accomplish that, achieve that, what is the supporting pillar? The supporting pillar is the culture of the organization, right? That helps determine how well the strategic imperatives in the organization or the startup are implemented or yield the outcome that are expected from them in the longer run, right? So it's very important in startup, uh, particularly startup, from a startup's point of view, that there is a cultural fitment that helps organizations to always stand by all the challenges that they face and make sure that they are moving forward on the path of growth.
Mr. Prakash, you said that idea is just 1% and execution is the remaining part. So, how much like would you contribute for a startup success to the HR management? Like, how important is that?
So the HR, in my mind, is custodian in any startup or the organization of the culture of the organization. HR
Mm-hmm.
by default becomes the point of contact for any employee related activities in the organization, and the success and the failure of the organization is strongly determined based on how the employees perform in the organization, and their performance is supported by the culture that gets built in the organization, that gets followed in the organization, that makes sure that the organization is being steered in the right direction by the right people, because there is a good cultural alignment. So the culture is very important, and in my mind, in the organization, there are people working in different uh, functions and the domains, but the
Mm-hmm.
center to the overall activity in the organization rests with the HR, because HR is the point of touch with the human resources in the organization who uh, takes the organization forward.
So it means that the role of the HR in shaping and maintaining purpose-driven culture in the startups is very important. So, what impact does it have on their strategic trajectory if we speak about?
So any organization, as I mentioned, right, is as strong as the people in the organization which are like determined
Mhm.
and and are clear about where they wish to take the organization, how they wish to grow themselves, and how they wish to grow the organization. So
Mhm.
as I said, the HR is the intersection between figuring it out what is the people or the employees working in the startup, what is their growth trajectory, right? What is their growth plan? How do they see themselves growing in their career by staying in the organization or by being part of the organization? And at the same time, HR is also well aware of the organization's goals and the the growth path that organization wish to pursue. How do you create a balance between the two is something that is totally dependent on the HR. So it greatly affects from an HR point of view to know where the organization is headed, where the employee is finding himself or herself in a position where they also see and appreciate that they are going to grow if the organization is going this direction, right? So the whole alignment is basically created by the HR, and that determines the strategic trajectory of the growth of the organization, growth of the individual associated with the organization.
Like you rightly said, Mr. Daya, like aligning the growth of the employees with the growth of the organization is very important. So, Mr. Daya, you were also one of the key speakers at the TICON's HR Summit 2024, which is being organized on the 2nd of February. The theme of the HR Summit is where culture meets strategy. From your experience, could you provide some examples or case studies of startups that have effectively aligned their cultures with overarching business strategies, leading to the sustainable growth of both the organization as well as the employees?
Sure. I think
Like any
it's a
startup
great
which you have come across.
I think it's a great question, but at the same time, let me also tell you honestly
Mhm.
that it will be very difficult for me to point out a single startup saying that okay, this is the organization. But let me just help you understand
Any good
this.
example, like if you
I,
can
I
share?
I would do that. I
Mhm.
will try and do that basically. So if you look at the particularly the pandemic time period that we all have gone through and post-pandemic era in which we are today, all right, there are so many startups who struggle to survive, even if the startup has always been considered as a very risky business. 90% of the businesses were
Mhm.
or startups were supposed to be failing at some point of the time in
Mhm.
during their journey, but there comes the
Mhm.
COVID and it becomes all the more difficult for organizations to or startups to sustain themselves. So if you look at in the last 3 to 4 years
Mhm.
period particularly, there are a lot of startups which got burst, right? And there are a lot of startups that are thriving. So there were these organizations which were or startups which are not just sustaining themselves but growing phenomenally. I mean, if you look at these startups, there are two things clearly emerges out of it. One is the need or the idea fitment of the startup in terms of the sense of the purpose of the startup. The second most important thing was that particularly when this COVID came, it was a
Mhm.
big challenge on a personal front with everyone associated or involved with the startup. All right. So it was
Yes.
very important for any startup which we see today growing leaps and bounds to have a right culture in the organization to make sure that the employees feel a sense of belongingness there and feel a sense of
Mhm.
purpose, and also see it as everything else as distraction which they need to definitely overcome and keep their focus on the growth and all the positive side of it, right? So there are so many startups if you see in today's world which have been growing, so many startups attaining the
Mhm.
status of unicorns and growing today, making sure that they
Mhm.
establish certain trends in the industry in their own respective domain in which they have been incorporated, right? These are all examples of great culture in the
Mhm.
organization,
Within the
because without
organization.
which it was not possible. There couldn't be, at least in my lifetime, so far I don't remember any such instance where it had so much of an impact on the person, to say, particularly the pandemic and people, right? So this is the biggest example of the times where it was the toughest time for person, but to keep people connected, stay put with the purpose, um, it was not possible to achieve without having a cultural alignment in the organization. And a lot of credit to the culture of the organization or the startups which are growing today goes to culture only.
So one of the main challenges that came across all the organizations and also within the employees during the pandemic and even post pandemic is insecurity. insecurity related to the jobs. We see some of the very big startups like unicorns or some big startups who are laying off in huge numbers. So that either puts the pressure on the existing employees, or they leave a sense of insecurity amongst the employees, which somehow affects their efficiency, their outputs. So you being from the talent acquisition firm, how do you deal with this? How do you what do you do to address this challenge?
So I think one thing which is very, very fundamental, that in today's world, which is so dynamic, things are changing
Mm-hmm.
so fast. And when we talk about economic uncertainties, downturn, pressure, etc., etc., all these factors. And when you try and see that I'm somehow trying to get a hang of all this, factors that are affecting all such things that you have spoken about, and especially the job losses, right? There comes
Mm-hmm.
the AI, invention of AI. So
Mm-hmm.
everything almost is coming on the same time, whether it is economic pressure and the sentiments and the other things, the hard realities of the life, and then the advent and innovation in the domain of AI, generative AI, that we are talking about. So the situation is something that is going to be difficult. Let's accept the fact first, that the situation is going to be very,
Mm-hmm.
very difficult, very, very dynamic. We don't know sitting today what all are the jobs that are going to survive tomorrow, what are all the jobs that are going to be created for tomorrow, right? So it's a very, very uncertain time, very, very difficult to predict. But what I suggest everyone, as an individual, I also, as a founder of the organization, I just keep my focus on making sure that what we do as an organization or startup, or what we do as an the founders of the organizations or the employees of the organization, is, are we relevant to today's context or not? We have to
Mm-hmm.
constantly keep figuring it out, whether you are a contributor on a technical side, whether you are a contributor on any other business function side. But all the time, one thing that you have to fundamentally keep thinking is that, are you relevant? The job that you are doing today, how is it impacting, how is it contributing to the organization's growth? How is it contributing to your customers? How is it contributing to the end consumer, who could be
Mm-hmm.
anybody, right? I mean, if you have a
Mm-hmm.
clear vision of what you're doing is making sense to somebody in the ways that you think that, okay, I understand now, yeah, this is what I'm doing and this is how it is making sense to someone, you are relevant. But if you figure it out that what you're doing today, you're not able to complete the 360-degree loop, where you are able to appreciate it, that how is it contributing to the end consumer, someone who's consuming your services, someone who's consuming your products or solution, or
Mm-hmm.
anything that you're offering as an organization. If you find it
The
difficult to,
validation of the product and services that you are doing.
then it is the right, strategy for you to follow, is that how should I quickly unlearn, relearn, and be relevant in today's context? So, if it's not about today's scenario where you see all these job cuts and everything, but I think time is
Mm-hmm.
such that this will become part and parcel of life, and we have to all the times deal with it. So we have to continuously upskills ourselves and keep ourselves making relevant to the current context. Gone are the days where
Mm-hmm.
you will acquire certain skills and you will spend your entire life on those skills, and
Doing that particular thing.
having no need to kind of reskill, upskill yourself. Gone are the days. The
Mm-hmm.
world is changing so fast that you have to keep pace with it. There is no other option, unfortunately.
So the startup environment is very dynamic, like, and attracting and retaining talent is a constant challenge for the startups. So, according to you, what innovative strategies can do you recommend for the talent management within a culture-driven framework, which can ensure that startups not only acquire the right talent but also nurture their key assets and they are able to retain these talents?
So I think culture. We have been speaking about culture. This is the key fundamental. This is the key foundation, and something which basically defines and determines the way how the startup is going to stay put, or grow, sustain or grow, or whatever stage
Mhm.
the startup would be in. But I think what is I'll take a step back, and I would say that the foremost and the first most important thing for any startup is to make sure that any
Mhm.
employee of the startup, when it is inducted in the team, especially
Mhm.
in the startup world, it is very very important to figure it out whether or not there is a purpose alignment. If the
Mhm.
purpose alignment is there, then you perhaps look at the second attribute in my mind, which is again a crucial thing, is the attitude of the people getting onboarded. So the purpose
Mhm.
alignment and the attitude, and then if these two things are there, you can train the person or the individual for any skill that you want them to perform the task in. And startup, as I mentioned earlier, also is a very very dynamic world, wherein you
Mhm.
get to learn things very fast. But if you don't have purpose alignment, if you don't have the right attitude as an employee of a startup, it becomes very difficult for you to kind of keep pace with the startup dynamics, and for startup to kind of make sure that there is a right culture within the organization, because these two pillars are missing in certain individuals, and you're
Mhm.
a team is as strong as the weakest player in the team. Yeah.
So, Mr. Daya, how can these startups, like the mass layoffs, why any of the startups, be it the small or the bigs, which have gone out in the news, have sent this message to all the top talents in the industry, like, okay, your jobs are very insecure, or they are not, it's not permanent in the startup, so they refrain from joining the startups. And startups are the organizations which work with minimal resources, be it the employees or be it any other resources. So how can the startups give that confidence to those top talents, like, okay, you come, you join with us, we'll make you grow with us, and your job cannot go like that. So what do you do to
I
build that confidence among the talents in the
I, I
industry?
I have a completely different perspective on this, right? I mean, it's a fact, hard fact, and my empathy, sympathy with all these people who have been suffering from these layoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that. But startup word is a word which basically takes you very close to the hard realities of life, right?
Okay.
Um, you know, if a person is getting laid off from startup, right? Obviously, as a startup, if we are anyways in a situation where we have done over hiring, where we are actually not following certain basic norms in terms of making sure that, okay, we try to make sure that the individuals are engaged in with the startups as long as they wish and they possess the skills and everything, right? So and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
taking any sides here, but from a
Mm-hmm.
startup point of
You
view,
just mean that they have to be ready to for the uncertainties.
which helps them, because if we are
Okay.
ready for uncertainties, which means we are constantly acquiring the skills that are required by the organization or the startups, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fact that they the people get laid off and they move on to maybe the enterprise sector, if you say so, right?
The
Because there
corporate
are
sector,
well
yes.
defined jobs in the
Mm-hmm.
enterprise segments, and it becomes you know uh, relatively easy for you to sustain with the current skill sets that you have in the job for little longer duration. But mind you one thing,
Mm-hmm.
the way the times are changing, the way the technology is evolving, the jobs are changing very
Mm-hmm.
very fast, right? The
Rapidly. Yes.
shelf life of a particular technology is no more than 6 months now, right? How can you
Yes.
learn a particular technology or a skill and then say that I'm going to spend my next 20 years working on the same technologies. It's not possible. It's not possible. It happened in the past.
But Mr. Daya, skilling and upskilling is not the only problem. Skilling and upskilling is not the only problem.
Mhm.
Like just for the cost cutting measures, the first thing
Mhm.
that the startup or the organization does is they go for layoffs. What do you have to say in that case?
So as I said earlier also, that
Hmm.
there are certain things such like overhiring, hiring without
Mm-hmm.
giving it a complete thought, saying that how am I looking at this employee, let's say 5 years down the line within my startup, growing himself, and I being justifying as a startup founder that I can ensure a growth to this individual in my organization. So if that is not the case, if that is the case, obviously the onus
Mm-hmm.
comes to the founders a lot and the founding team of the startups a lot in terms of making sure that they don't make the basic mistakes, right? But if they have hired somebody
Mm-hmm.
which they feel strongly that they are the right employees or candidate for the startups to work in, it the onus comes to the individuals also to make sure that they keep demonstrating that they are relevant for the startups, right? It should not happen so where they say that okay, I possess these skills, and this is something. So I keep always asking one question to everybody, saying that whenever I meet someone in my team, I just ask them, what you're doing is it something that I can do? Is it something that your the neighbor can do? If they are able to do that, right, you are not doing something which can only be done by you, and there are high chances that this becomes redundant at some point of time, right? So we have to always keep figuring it out, and I'm not saying that the onus does not come on the founders and the startup ecosystem custodians for the
Mm-hmm.
mass layout and everything, layoff and everything. But it is a lot. I mean, I would say it's equally dependent on people also, how do they react to it, right? I mean, there have been layoff, we all hear this day in day out, right? But aren't these candidates or people who are getting laid off getting the jobs back? And how many of them would be getting the job back by saying, I have these skills, I have been laid off, I have these skills, is it relevant for you, you just hire me? No. Lot of people are going through this upskilling, reskilling, right? And then they get
Mm-hmm.
into the job. This was possible when you were in the job. You
Okay.
could have you
What
could
do you
have
mean to say that
demonstrated
you
the same.
cannot just go to any startup and say that, okay, we have this particular skills, you have a job in which I can be useful. You have to make yourself useful according to the startup or the organization. So
As I
you
said,
have
it's
to
a dynamic world. It's
mm,
changing every day. It's changing
every day.
every day, right? Google is laying off 30,000 people as we hear,
Mm-hmm.
because AI is going to replace them, right? If the
Mm-hmm.
AI is going to replace them, and I was talking to this startup the other day, I'll just take one example. There is this startup I was talking to, 60 people doing DevOps work in the startup. With the help of
Mm-hmm.
AI, the requirement has only become 10. So the 50 job role has been,
Cut out.
taken up by AI. Now,
Mm-hmm.
these 50 people, if they have other roles that they can play, number one, in the organization, that is organization or startup responsibility. But if they have the other roles to be played, and which requires upskilling by these individuals, their ability to upskill themselves, their ability
Mm-hmm.
to demonstrate that yes, we are ready for upskilling, versus no, 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 this is my core strength, this is my core skill, I want to remain in this, right? That leads to these unfortunate incidences or instances where we hear the layoffs, but it doesn't happen like the AI comes in and there is a 60 people job being done by 10 people job, 50 people are said thank you so much. No, the organization has invested into them by hiring them, by training them. So the layoffs are not a one sided loss. It's a great loss to the
Okay.
company. So we have to appreciate that.
Okay. So, Mr. Daya, according to you, the intervention with regards to this should be done at what stage? Should it be done at the institution level that you have to train the students while they are pursuing the different courses? Like you have to adapt this thing to skill, reskill, and upskill yourself continuously throughout your career, no matter what stage you are into, or at the
So I
organization
think
level when you go for
so
the
I
job?
think entire ecosystem. And I remember, and talking about 2 to 3 decades back, right?
Hmm.
This was a very very common phenomenon, and I heard it a decade back as well. You know, uh, not even decade back, even 5 years back. I met somebody, or it's a common thing where students get inducted from the colleges to the corporate, and the attitude, that general attitude was that this is my time in the college. When I go in the corporate, when I join them, they will tell me what I need to learn, and that is the time when I will learn, right? And these companies, large companies, be it Infosys, TCS, Wipro, any large company you pick, they had 8 to 9 month program which was designed for these you know new entrants in the corporate from the college, because everybody knew that when they come out from the colleges, they will not be possessing the skills, and we will have to train them, right? So this was like a well designed program that they used to run for these students.
Hmm.
This scenario has changed. If you look at colleges today, if you look at the students today, when they get the campus placement, the the students are able to demonstrate that they possess the skills, right? So
Hmm.
it has to come from within. It is so the
Hmm.
onus lies on the employees or the candidates or on us to make ourselves employable at any stage, whether it is moving from college to corporate, or within the corporate. If I have 5 year experience or 20 years of experience, I have to keep myself up to date all the time, that I stay relevant for the organization, and I know that I am achieving
Hmm.
my growth objectives at the same time I'm contributing to the startups growth objective as well. So if this alignment is there, everything is in place. We don't have to worry at all, but we need to
So,
change this.
one last question, Mr. Prakash. Like governance and cultural alignment are very pivotal aspects of any growing organization. So, from your perspective, how can startups strike a balance between maintaining a strong governance structure and fostering a culture that promotes innovation, adaptability, and I would also say inclusivity?
Absolutely. So let's understand. A startup is, by definition, startup is what? Startup is something that is going to kind of create something very, very fast, right? So it's like fail fast approach. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so for that, it has to execute very fast. So for executing fast, there is a strong cultural alignment which we have already spoken about, which is needed for any startup. So with the culture, the startup is able to make sure that they differentiate themselves from the established enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
The pace at which they move, the kind of industry disruption possibilities that they have, which they are supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be, which they are meant for, right? So that happens. However, when you move very fast, at times you tend to lose on certain very very important aspects, which basically are covered through proper governance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And risk management. So I would say that for any organization, any startup which is a growing startup, which is like thriving startup, they have two fundamental things in place. One, a strong engine, or a strong engine in terms of cultural alignment in the people, which is
Mm-hmm.
taking the organization forward at the
Mm-hmm.
fastest pace possible. But at the same time, they also have a very strong risk governance compliance framework, which is there, which is following the path, and making sure that during this fast paced journey, the organizations are not committing to certain basic fundamental mistakes, right? So these both things are important in my mind. And in startup, both pillar have to work together, all together at the same time, making sure that the startup is moving in the right direction, is moving at a fast pace, because uh, startup does not have a luxury of taking 30 years to prove that what they were meant for, and were they able to achieve the whole purpose or the core purpose for which they got established, or not. So they don't have.
So thank you, Mr. Prakash. Thank you for talking to us. I'm sure your insights like shows that what role does human resources play in achieving the long-term successes for the startups. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you so much.